І по регламенту, як мені казала Віка, до 30 хвилин плюс-мінус, так? Це всього, чи це ваш спіч, а потім ще получасне запитання? Оголошую тему, першу знову ж прошу пані Уляну, далі пані Уляна говорить, а далі вже, як ви забажаєте, інтерес. Чи то я буду всіх оголошувати по черзі, чи то ви, а потім вже коли всі виступлять, до бесіди на запитання, і потім, можливо, якісь приватні інтерв'ю з журналістами. Шановні колеги, ми будемо продовжувати.
We continue our working day in the UCMC. The topic of the next event is tactical medicine or death, tactical medicine in Ukraine. Our guests are Ulana Suprun, acting Minister of Healthcare of Ukraine, Oleksandr Linchevskyi, Deputy Minister of Healthcare of Ukraine, Pavlo Ivko, tactical medicine trainer, Maksym Tsyganok, trauma surgeon from Kyiv City Clinical Hospital number 17, and Oleksandr Danyliuk, military surgeon. Good afternoon, colleagues. The first one, Ulana, good afternoon. Thank you for coming to this round table. Today we would like to talk a little bit about military medicine, how military medicine and civil medicine cooperate in Ukraine, what are the requirements to us and to civil medicine and the military medicine, and how we will be implementing them. First, I would like to talk on the interaction between military and civil medicine. Now there's a war going on the territory of Ukraine that differs from organizing medicine in NATO countries. Mostly they have a war waged not on their territory. They have their military who render medical assistance, but they go together with the troops to another country, and then they have the infrastructure that they can rely on. Their system of military medicine is somewhat different from ours in this hybrid war. I believe that our medicine now is also hybrid. It's not exactly military and not exactly civil. We understand that we provide assistance to servicemen in regular hospitals in the east. That's where people get assistance after wounding. And there are civilian doctors and military doctors working, but they need doctors there. There's a shortage of doctors because many of them are IDPs and they live in other regions of Ukraine. They lack medical assistance. This summer in Ukraine, we approved the Strategic Bulletin of Defense, which has the plan up to 2020 on how we will be approximating NATO standards. The medical part is described very carefully there, how we need to reform our armed forces, our military, so that their medical system gets close to what is in NATO. It is also important that we look at how civil medicine cooperates with military medicine. In NATO countries, they are cooperating. We had the meeting with the representatives of NATO 2 days ago, and yesterday they were at the Ministry of Defense, and we were looking at our duties as to strategic bulletin. It says that military have to cooperate together with the civilians, and civilian protocols and training and licensing should be in military medicine. We would like to organize our military and our civilians so that they coincide, so that our military medical doctors can work in civilian life. We have different levels and NATO standards. That is a tactical medicine training for every serviceman. That is at the same level as when they are as what they call first responders in police and in fire brigades. Also, there should be the first responder in medicine where they can give more assistance. Higher than that, in Ukraine we have the so-called sanitary instructor. In NATO standard at 68 whiskey, that could be the emergency medical technician. There's a military medic who can become a paramedic, and there are nurses and there are doctors. We have started the system of training mostly via volunteer groups or NGOs. There is no standardization in the armed forces. We need these trainings to coincide with what we do in civilian medicine. We are now cooperating with law enforcement bodies so that it all coincides. We insist that in a short period of time to have the protocols TCC and 68 whiskey to be approved so that our military have permits so that they can do interventions that we teach them. Now I would like to give the floor to Oleksandr Linchevskyi, Deputy Minister of Healthcare, and he will tell us what's the difference between civilian and military medicine. Good evening. We've been talking about that many times, but in mass media, in social networks in this society, there are many myths and there's misunderstanding of what is military medicine or civilian medicine. Among the medical workers, there are many misunderstandings. There are old Soviet dogmas of military field surgery. Let's repeat it again. From the position of civil servants, first of all, the history of tactical medicine is not adequate, does not mean the adequate. It's not an old notion. American troops started examining it in the 1990s and 1993. The research started that changed the understanding of how assistance should be provided in the battlefield. What I mean, from ancient times, the doctor, the medical worker, having some knowledge, having some experience of work in the peaceful life, they were trying to transfer their knowledge, their equipment, and themselves closer to a wounded serviceman. They were trying to transfer automatically, just like we work in our civilian life. The doctors would transfer all the methods and equipment and training closer to the battlefield. We have recently found out that there's very little rationale in that. The research of the reasons of the death, the examining of the structure of wounds, that was important. First, what was discovered first? Despite the expected, a wounded soldier dies not in the hospital. We repeated it many times, but the main thing is a lion's share of those who die, they die before they face any medical worker. That is very important to remember. Unlike the regular type of wound, when a wounded person can quickly get to the hospital because the ambulance will come quickly or a doctor will be there, you see? In technical situation, no one would come to help because everyone would be doing their own things. 90% of all who die, they die before they meet anyone. From the 90s, the understanding of that fact changed drastically the understanding of a wound. And unlike an old Soviet concept, our Western colleagues started to pay more attention to training, to teaching every soldier, every serviceman, and also a lot of attention was paid to medical kits, to equipment which is needed. A simple example, when we are saying we used that any wound, like a mother was cutting bread and cut the finger, we take something and wrap, but that
bandage.
And this regular bandage, well, you cannot use it if it's raining. And what people are used to, what we're used to in regular life, what could be more important than a bandage. But there should not be the bandage in the medical kit. There is the so-called Israeli bandage, which a person can put on himself or herself. It's easy to use. If we put our regular bandage to the medical kit, the soldier will not be able to use it. So, first thing, very important thing, 90% of all those who died, they die before they meet with the doctor. Out of them, from 13 to 24% could have been saved if the one who's next to them knows how to render assistance and if he had everything needed. In the history, during the history of development of tactical medicine, we've learned that medical community, military medical community, has clarified how the servicemen should be trained. We understand that the time of death is the first minutes, but we know what are the main reasons for death. And the medical kit is now made so that the serviceman is saved, so that in the first minutes the assistance could be rendered that would save his life. We are laughing all the time, but the serviceman in winter may have cold feet. It does not mean that there should be some chemical heating package in the medical kit. The burns, that's painful, that leads to some complications, but the anti-burn gel is not something that should be in every medical kit, and there are many differences like that. Tactical medicine is developing. Every new conflict develops it. Twice a week, the Committee on Tactical Medicine gets together and they discuss whether they need to add something to training or to medical kits. Even during these 3 years, at a certain stage, they started paying less attention to teaching every soldier how to do intravenous injections, for example. The medical education, even surgical experience, does not mean that the doctor, the surgeon, is the expert in tactical medicine and automatically is the instructor and automatically is the military field surgeon. in the surgery of wounds, there are specific features. We understand that we medicians, we need to learn the nature of wounds in time and the structure of wound. We need to understand perfectly well who has to provide assistance, how such person should be trained. And now I will give the floor to...
Thank you. In line with official statistics of the Ministry of Defense, the combat losses in 2015 were 2,132 servicemen. In 2016, 173 Ukrainian servicemen were perished, and out of 15 out of them could probably survive.
15%.
If 15% of them could survive if they were to receive the training and the individual medical kit. And this is the main principle for the defense or protection of Patriots NGO, which delivers individual medical kits. I would like to give the floor to Pavlo Ivko, a tactical medicine trainer who is a representative of the NGO Patriot Defense. Thank you. I would like to remind you the topic of our today's discussion, tactical medicine or death. As for us, we choose the first part of this sentence. We stand for tactical medicine against death. Let's look at all the paths of a serviceman who is wounded, and by the moment when from the war field he comes to the hospital. So the first aid is delivered by the immediate neighbor of this soldier. Later, the first step that his neighbor has to stabilize his situation, then he is evacuated to the hospital, and the third stage of treatment is in the hospital. So we started from the very beginning, from the rescue course. And very soon after beginning, we understood that just the first step was not enough, and that we had to cover all the stages in training. So the first is training course of first aid. This is the basic but sufficient amount of training and information and skills which should be mastered by each serviceman. It is based on the standard protocols. The second course is UPM course, which covers the second stage of assistance. And we held around 27 rounds of courses, and up to more than 270 servicemen, primarily from special forces, were trained. And the third part of this course is called RLM, which is designed for professional doctors who work with war wounds in the hospital conditions. So these are the three main stages of our work related to tactical medicine. Also, we work much with police forces and with civilian population. Quite often we establish relations with many agencies, conclude contracts and train sanitary instructors, sanitary personnel for them. Unfortunately, the biggest problem of some our trainees is that they receive very good training. They have a lot of information, they have a lot of knowledge, but they lack practical skills. And having understood this, we focus our attention on the ATO area. We have small bases there where we organize our points, special points. I presume that when the degree or in the intensity of combat activities will decrease, the intensity of our work will also drop down. As far as we see that tactical medicine is a complicated thing, and the individual medical kits should be similar to the NATO standards, should be packed in line with NATO standards. And as you have already understood, the first aid is not enough to rescue lives of our servicemen, so the second stage is evacuation. Our friend Maksym Tsyganok, who is a trauma surgeon, he works for the Kyiv City Clinical Hospital number 17 now, and he deals with evacuation and training of the new medical corps personnel. During these 2-3 years of war, since 2014, we have got a unique experience, which we never had. First, there were volunteer battalions, which were near the contact line. Later, we witnessed the appearance of so-called hospitalier volunteer teams. What was the main intention when people created these volunteer teams? The idea was to ensure this quick evacuation. The state medical service, the state military medical service was unable to ensure a flexible shift to the most up-to-date technology or procedure of evacuation. So these volunteer teams, which I mentioned, like Veterok, like Starik Khatabych, like Galinas, they started to study international experience, and then they introduced this international experience to the Ukrainian field conditions. And now some of those volunteer organizations became civil society organizations or charity foundations. They had to do this because they had to look for additional funding, for money for their work, and in order to be able to do fundraising, they had to register themselves as legal entities. So they are now registered as charity foundations, many of them at least. And now medical workers, paramedical workers, and even some people who came to that volunteer battalions or volunteer medical battalions without any medical experience, they now have got real, very rich experience. And at the first stage, that medical delivery service had a form of taxi. So immediately when a serviceman was wounded, the blood current was stopped, and his health situation was stabilized, and they called for this volunteer car, and that volunteer car delivered evacuated this wounded serviceman to the hospital. Unfortunately, due to the lack of skills and lack of knowledge during this transportation, in course of this transportation, and during time when he was transported from the battlefield to the hospital, in many cases seriously wounded soldiers, they died. That's why at rather early stages, Patriot Defense started to organize trainings for doctors and for nurses, instructing them what to do with a wounded soldier in course of the evacuation, in course of transportation. Of course, you can stop the blood current, but that's not enough. When you transport the wounded from one point to another, you should do a series of standard operations to monitor the situation with his health. And the protocols which we trained in our today's medical corps, we implement the project of Rostislav Zaoralsky about blood and about operations with donors' blood at a distance of not more than 5 kilometers from the front line. So this is a special project, and all doctors, nurses, paramedical workers, drivers who are involved into this project quite recently began to receive official status of the medical workers for the front, and but this is not enough, because when a soldier dies during transportation in a car, the volunteer, and in result of this very natural incident, volunteers can have problems. Of course, they bring this body to the morgue, to the hospital, and then they have legal problems. So there are the following questions. Who was present at the moment of evacuation? What medicines were given to the soldier? Or what qualification did those people have? And etc. Now, Ministry of Health is thinking how to build up this procedure correctly in order to balance the possibility for those people who do this very important part of work when they evacuate soldiers from the field, and at the same time to protect them from legal responsibility in case of old bureaucracy applied to them. Of course, we have now good experience, bad experience. Our task today is to select best cases and learn lessons. For example, when we worked together with hospitaliers who had paramedical workers, that paramedical workers entered red zone, evacuated wounded servicemen and brought them to the neighboring zone, to yellow zone, where the health of the wounded servicemen was stabilized by professional doctors, and that professional doctors then it was evacuated to the conventional hospitals in the rear. Actually, this is very similar to the NATO scheme, and we have now many good ideas how this should be done here in Ukraine, and we hope that very soon we will standardize all those procedures. Thank you very much. Tomorrow we will commemorate the Day of the Defender of Ukraine. This is the third year in a row when we celebrate the holiday of the intercession of the Virgin, and when we commemorate this day and commemorate all those who defended us and gave their lives. We have a great honor to have in our ministry such a defender who today works in the Department for Coordination and Supplies to the ATO area. This is a surgeon who stayed in the Baltsevo, in Shasta, in Stanitsa, Luhanska, in all those hot spots which we all remember quite well. Currently, he works for the ministry, and in August, he spent 3 weeks in Avdiivka, and he can update us about today's situation, how first aid is delivered to servicemen today in the ATO area. Thank you, Minister. We have a hybrid war, and this immediately became a challenge, not just for the military, for the tactical officers, but for tactical medicine and for civil medicine, which faced this hybrid war for the first time. Actually,
the war lasts on our territory, and it affects our medical institutions. The front line stopped. For 2 years it hasn't been changed, and along that line there are 17 hospitals, several dozen. The medical points, ambulance stations. Some of the hospitals are ruined or damaged. Some of the doctors left the hospitals. The nurses, because of the financial issues, probably did not leave these institutions. But we have a big shortage of doctors. The war led to this situation that medicine started to get adapted to the hybrid war, and they have started creating some hybrid formations like military, civilian, nurses and doctors brigade. At the tactical level, the military doctors and civilian doctors started cooperating. They're working in same institutions. They are saving lives to both military and civilians and even prisoners of war. From 2014 till 2016 is the third year of the war, and we have made a huge step forward because we are learning from our mistakes. In 2014, all were making very big tactical medical mistakes, and now we have been learning from all these mistakes. Our real rear was translating the textbooks of NATO standards. They were preparing the courses for doctors, for nurses, for servicemen, and we started to upgrade our level of education. Ulana quoted how many killed people we have, but the number of killed people is going down, and that is because we are teaching tactical medicine at the front line and in different healthcare institutions, both military and civilian. There are damaged hospitals without light, and that's where the doctors have to work. These are the conditions close to the field conditions. The doctors had to make surgeries in the hospitals without windows, have damaged. That was happening in Stanitsa, Lugansk and Kurakhova, and that's a heroism of local doctors and the doctors of the armed forces of Ukraine, and also the doctors volunteers who practically having no rights there are traveling, find the time to save lives of people. That is a certain phenomenon of the people of Ukraine. We are preparing our own army, and we are holding this medical front. Compared to 2014 now, again thanks to the people of Ukraine, we have a very good logistics on evacuation. The volunteer teams, they take people out of the battlefield, they render assistance. Then by radio we inform that there are some wounded people and the brigade is ready, the hospital is ready, they know the number of wounded, they know what they need to take these wounded soldiers. The stabilization teams are all informed and they are ready for action. Well, what are the problems? There are many medical doctors who work there, but we need to overcome the bureaucratic walls. So this is to be done regularly, so that that does not require a lot of bureaucratic processing, so that they can be sent as they desire, so that they support the work of our stabilization teams. The people who get to the hospital, once they reach the hospital, they are to be rescued there. It's a pity when there were cases when we didn't have enough doctors, didn't have the artificial breathing apparatus, and we were losing wounded people because of that. That is why we have a lot of work to do. So that we can improve this system, so that we can use it, so that every local citizen, every warrior knows that the life will be saved. Yes, thank you. These are our tasks in the Ministry of Healthcare. We would like to have the situation when all have the opportunity to learn tactical medicine, combat medicine, so that they can give assistance and be awarded for their work. They are defending us, and our duty is to defend them as well. Today, in the Ministry of Healthcare, we had certain activities dedicated to the Day of Defender. At one of them, Vladimir Vitrovich was making presentation, and he told how in Ukrainian army of uprisers the assistance was rendered. For the first time they organized the Ukrainian Red Cross. Now our duty is to help organize similar assistance for our military. Again, what can we do? In the ministry we can improve the protocols and the teaching of tactical military medicine, so that there is one but very high quality standard for everyone to ensure the protocols. Well, that's our work, but so that people are trained and so that they provide properly all the equipment, that is under the responsibility of the ministry and other law enforcement bodies. We request them, let us cooperate with us so that we together can finalize this work, so that our defenders, so that we defend our defenders like they defend us. Now we have several minutes for questions, if you have questions.
Good afternoon. I'm Maria Nazarova, one of the military paramedicals from the Medical Academy. Since one of the standards of the Ministry of Health is the use of the proved medicine, my question is as follows: whether we can have such an instrument for collection of our proofs, because what we have now, standard 300 and standard 100, they are not sufficient to reflect properly the primary health information in order to use it later as a proof. As usually, we have good news and not good news. As for primary documentation, I absolutely agree with you. You're absolutely right. Without adequate statistical processing of data and sufficient statistical data, the protocols existent now in the world won't be possible. The primary information registered, the primary register made on the field, and which later is supplied by the documentation from the hospital, should be filled rather carefully. So filling in the cards in the record documentation during all the stages of treatment is very important for future stages, for future wounded soldiers who later will be treated based on the standard protocols. This is the first important thing to understand. The second important thing to understand is that much in technical medicine was done by civil society, by volunteers, by non-government organizations, by civilian doctors who arrived to the battlefields as volunteers. So this is a good model showing the real possibilities of the society. That's why we encourage all the volunteers to get engaged into many trainings organized abroad to study this quality and to enable us to develop this quality and adequately. And now bad news. In the United States, that primary documentation is filled in correctly or fully and properly only in 13%. This means that the combat conditions do not allow to do this carefully and properly on the battlefield. Dmitro Fomin, a volunteer. The Ministry of Defense, there is the military medical department who is responsible for tactical medicine. So my question to you, whether you have any relations with this department in the Ministry of Defense, whether you have any cooperation, and what? Let's start from the very beginning. A good aspect. In Russian Federation, they have something like, some newspaper is Военно-медицинский Courier, which stated that Ukrainian tactical medicine is the best one in the former Soviet Union. And this only proves that despite all our irritation because of the Ministry of Defense and its medical department. But nevertheless, this is the fact that we had overcome that terrible situation which was in our tactical medicines 3 years ago. Now we have put forward an initiative to create one comprehensive, united medical staff under the Cabinet of Ministers. Instead of having special departments in the Ministry of Defense and in the Ministry of Health. It won't be a big panel of experts. It should be like 5-7 people who are real experts and who will operationally resolve many issues.
In fact, the misunderstandings, the discrepancies with the medical department, and at the stage of practical actions, if the military do not have something. But the medical corps, the hospitaliers, they have someone, the surgeon or blood component or a machine, vehicle that would transport the blood. So all misunderstandings end up quickly in this case. Then, let's put it this way. There are different situations. We've prepared the report. That was done, but not thanks to the mechanisms which the military have, unfortunately. They don't have any remobiles, these ambulance vehicles. Was the evacuation done? Yes, there was, but who did it? Khatabich. Yesterday, we had the meeting of medicians, of doctors from NATO. They came to Ukraine to help Ukrainian troops so that they can complete this work which is required by bulletin. And we organized the law enforcement bodies so that they come and meet them at the Ministry of Healthcare. But from the Ministry of Defense, there was no head of the medical unit, and that probably shows to what extent there is an interest to that. Anna Maybarda, volunteer. A few comments on the question. Responsibility for tactical medicine lies with the Central Medical Department. And unfortunately, the person who would be responsible for tactical medicine, the person who knows that, we have no such a person. While we are trying to teach military, while we are creating this reform or developing from the bottom, until the leadership understands that there should be a certain level, we will not be able to understand anything. The Ministry of Public Health, with the assistance of new standards to be passed, the course has to be done by everyone, including generals. We need to issue recommendation. Maybe that it would be better. We would move for faster in reforms if the ministry has had the full training. If they put aside their things and look into what we are talking about. They did a lot of things. They are very much responsible. When kernels of field medicine can tell you about this technical medicine, can we write some rules that a person, a doctor, like in NATO countries, has to attend this basic course, irrespective of whether that's the general or a colonel, and it would be much easier to promote reforms then. There are two pieces of news, good news and bad news. And the solution, good news. There is a tsunami of changes in the society. We can resist, we can say that it will not happen, we can turn away from it, but in Ukraine, in the Ukrainian authorities, in the Ukrainian troops, we will have a high quality tactical medicine, providing assistance from the point where a person was wounded to the final hospital will be just the same as in any other NATO countries. This is what will take place. Now bad news. Everyone has to find its own place in that situation. And when we are waiting for tsunami of changes, I'm not talking just about tactical medicine, but about changes in the society. Each one of us, each one of the military, from the Ministry of Defense, can find his or her role in approximating these changes. All the changes were reached because of your efforts. From the point of view of a civil servant, to change the system from the inside. For that, there are objective difficulties. I do not want to justify all the mistakes committed, well, in the Ministry of Defense and agencies, when the opportunity was not grabbed or the money wasn't used, not at all. But we do have the Ministry of Defense, the one that we have. Sometimes you have to help it. Sometimes you can push it. You can try to change the system from inside. This should be done. It will not be changed by itself. Come to us for training. Let us change the system together. Let's get your ideas implemented. We need to move from volunteer work to professionalism. Thank you. Our event is over. Good luck to you and see you again.